Hi, thanks so much for being here to hear stories about taking care of our earth. They're all from a book I wrote called Earth Care, World of Folktales to talk about. And I asked friends from all over the world to contribute some of the stories from that book that they'd been telling, make YouTubes and send them in, or videos and send them in. And Jeff Gear, it was his idea, and Jeff has edited all of these, put them together into two wonderful programs. Hope you already heard the first program. Now we have a second one with 7 more stories, a little bit quieter and a little bit longer in this session. So I hope you enjoy these, and all of these stories are going to be online as YouTube selections. You can just search for Earth Care MRM and the title of the story, or just Earth Care MRM, and you'll see all the stories showing up from these programs. Thanks for being here. I hope you'll like some of these stories and go and pass them on. On a hillside in England, there once stood 3 huge oak trees. No one knows how old they were, but very old. The farmer who owned that land called them the 3 green ladies. And he would climb the hill every May Day and bring a bouquet of primroses for each of the 3 green ladies and lay them at the foot of the tree. That farmer never spoke of owning the land. He said, I am the caretaker of the land. I am the steward of this land, and I will take care of this land as long as I live. And after me, my sons will care for the land. And after them, their sons will care for the land. It's our responsibility to look after this land. But the farmer died, and his eldest son inherited the property. And that son said, this land is mine. It belongs to me. He said no word about taking care of the land. He said, everything that I see here belongs to me to do with as I want. On May Day, the youngest son started to climb the hill with 3 bouquets for the 3 green ladies, and the oldest son stopped him and said, stop, you can't go up there. That land belongs to me now. Besides, tomorrow I'm chopping down one of those trees to build a barn for myself. And the next day he did as he had said. He climbed that hill and he began to chop, and he chopped and he chopped and he chopped and he chopped at the heart of that tree, and he chopped and he chopped and he chopped at the heart of that tree till the tree began to fall. And a wind came out of nowhere and blew the tree round and round and round, and it fell on that young man and killed him dead. They came and took his body away, and they took the tree, and they did build a barn. And the second son inherited the property. And he said, all this is mine. It belongs to me now. I am the owner. I can do as I want with this property. He never spoke about caretaking. And the next May Day, the youngest son started up the hill again to bring bouquets for the remaining 2 green ladies. His elder brother said, stop, that property's mine. Get off of there. You can't go up there. Besides, tomorrow I'm chopping down one of those green ladies to build a fence to surround my property. And the next day he did as he said. He climbed the hill and he took his axe and began to chop and chop and chop at the heart of the tree, and chop and chop and chop at the heart of the tree till the tree began to fall, and a wind came out of nowhere and blew the tree round and round and round and round, and it fell on top of that young man and killed him dead. They came and carried him away, and they built the fence. But now the land belonged to the youngest son. He said, I will take care of this land. I am the steward of the land. I will care for it during my lifetime. And after me, my sons will do the same, and their grandsons also. And he climbed the hill, and he left 3 bouquets at the foot of the last green lady. But I fear that sometime in the future, another young man will climb the hill, and he will begin to chop and chop and chop at the heart of that last green lady.
There was once a king who wore silken robes and a golden crown, who listened to ministers and ambassadors and decided on this man's freedom and that man's life, who decided whether to make war or peace. People said he was a wise king, a good king, but he himself was not so sure. How could any man who wore silken robes and slept on a soft feather bed and whom nobody ever said no to, how could that man remain wise? And so he often got up in the cool dimness of the early dawn, dressed himself in simple clothing, and wandered the streets of his city. He listened to the sleepy chatter of the market stallholders as they set up their stalls for the day. He listened to the gossip of the women by the well, and he wandered through narrow cobbled lanes and listened at windows, where inside women fed their husbands and children and hurried them off to work and school. And sometimes he would go out of the city gates, up into the hills beyond, for he felt that the cool, clear air of the hills would give his mind some clarity for the decisions of the day ahead. One day, when he was walking in the hills, he saw a shepherd sitting on a rock, eating a simple breakfast of bread and olives. The old man called him over. "Come, come, share my breakfast." The cool air of the hills and the long walk had sharpened the king's appetite, so he readily agreed, and he sat down beside the old man and ate the bread and olives. The shepherd seemed hungrier for a listener than for his breakfast, and he talked on and on about his sheep, about the weather, about his children in the village below, and all the village gossip. The king listened with but just half an ear, for he was taken up by the beauty of the scene before him. As he looked down the hillside, he could see the wheat fields that stretched almost to the city walls. And then there were the olive groves and the vineyards, and behind them the orange groves. And there was the river winding lazily through them towards the sea. Suddenly, the shepherd's voice broke through the king's thoughts. "That king! He makes himself fat with the sheep I rear. He has everything. He owns all this land. But I don't grudge him. No, I don't grudge him. I don't want so much. I would be happy with just a little more. If I had just a little more, then I could be truly content." The king looked at the old man, and he thought to himself, I don't hear that so often. I don't hear people saying they would be content with just a little more. Perhaps I should grant him his wish. And so the king reached into his pockets and took out a coin and handed it to the shepherd. "Nay, I don't want payment. You are welcome to share my breakfast." "No, you misunderstand me. Look at the face on the coin." "I am sorry, Your Majesty, I am sorry." "No, don't worry. Don't worry. You said you wanted just a little more, and I would like to grant you your wish. I will give you whatever land your feet can encircle between now and sunset. I make only 2 conditions. First, please don't claim the palace. My wife is rather fond of it. And also, you must be back here at this rock by sunset or you will get nothing. I will stay here and look after your sheep. Perhaps it would do me good to learn the life of a shepherd. The old man stumbled out his thanks and bowed low. But when his head came up, he seemed confused. He sat down. For in truth, he did not know what to do. He did not know which land he should pick. The wheat fields? The olive grove? The vineyards? Or that pasture land beyond? And so he sat there for a long time, thinking. And the sun was high in the sky when he eventually got up. I will take the olive grove, he said to the king. And he bowed and set off down the hillside. Soon he was walking along the boundary of the olive grove, admiring those olive trees and thinking about what wonderful trees they were and the olive oil that came from them, the finest in the country. He walked and walked all around the olive grove and was just about to turn back to encircle the whole grove when he glanced over the wall and saw the vineyard. What wine comes out of that vineyard? Why, it is the best in the land. It is only mid-afternoon. If I hurry, I can have the vineyard too. And so he loosened his collar and quickened his pace and began to trot around the edge of the vineyard. Row after row after row of vines there were. It seemed never ending. But at last he reached the furthest point and was ready to turn back towards the hill. But there, what was that beyond? The orange grove. Oh, and what a magnificent orange grove it was! The trees gave forth their fruit in such abundance, and it was so sweet and juicy. If he hurried, he would have time to get that too, and so he started to run. He ran and he ran around the edge of the orange grove. He was an old man, but he pushed himself onwards. He ran and he ran and he ran until at last it was time to go back. Time to go back to the hill, and he would have the vineyard. He would have the olive grove and the orange grove. But then he saw it. The river. What a fool I am! What good is all this land without water? I must have the river too. And so he plunged into the river and swam across. He was a very old man, but he swam with all his strength, and he dragged himself out onto the other bank. His head was spinning, and his legs were like lead, but he saw with a sinking heart that the sun was sinking too. And so he pushed himself onwards. He ran and he ran, his gasping for breath. But then he had passed the orange grove, he had passed the vineyard, and he was back in the olive grove. He just had to cross the river again, and he could climb the hill. And luckily now the river was shallow and he could wade across. His throat was dry, but he did not stop to drink, for the sun was getting ever lower in the sky. And at last he had reached the end of the olive grove, and he began to climb the hill as the sun grew lower. He pushed himself onwards. Every breath was agony. Every step, his feet felt like lead. One foot after another, he was stumbling and tripping, hand over hand, foot over foot. He climbed that hill. And at last, just as the sun went down over the horizon, he grasped the king's foot. He had done it. He had done it. The king looked down at the shepherd. And then suddenly he saw his laboured breathing slow and then stop, and the hard grasp on his foot loosen. The king's sad eyes looked at the shepherd and then at his sheep and then at the land beyond. Just a little more. That's what he said he wanted. Just a little more. Well, that's all I can give him now. 6 foot, dug deep, and just a little more.
When there is a full moon, isn't it nice to get together with friends and share some stories? More if you are going to share also with some delicious wine. Well, that was exactly what some friends decided to do. To gather under the moonlight to share stories and some wine. That was the plan. As the day was getting closer, each one of the people that were involved started to think, what wine am I going to take? Maybe this one, or no, maybe this one. Let's see what year. They were trying to choose their best wine. But then they were told that all the wines were going to be mixed together in a vase. The day of the meeting, the day of the full moon, each one of the participants thought, well, if all is going to go together on a vase, maybe I just take some water. Who is going to notice that? That night came. The moon was beautiful all over the sky. Everybody had their stories ready. They say, let's toast so that the storytelling begins. And as they pour, there was nothing but water. Because pollution starts in your own jug. Salud!
A grove of trees stood on this hill, where just one twisted, gnarled one still is standing, thick with green. The cutters came and they said, "Oh Lord, how will we ever cut us a good straight board from this twisted tree?" So they let it be, and cut another, and cut another, and cut another. The carvers came after soft-grained wood, and said, "This twisted tree isn't any good. It's a naughty old tree," so they let it be, and cut another one, cut another one, cut another one, cut another one. The loggers came after logs to sell, and said, "This twisted tree burns a foul smell. It's a stink tree," so they let it be, and cut another tree, and cut another tree, cut another tree, and cut another tree, cut another, cut another, cut another. Soon there were no trees on this hill, except for that twisted, gnarled one, still standing, thick with green. In the day, the children come and they play in its shade. In the evening, the old men gather round its trunk and they sigh. They sit and they talk about their lives. Oh, what's the use of being useless? One old man said. "Friend," said another, "look up above your head. A grove of trees stood on this hill, where just one twisted, gnarled one still is standing, thick with green. Had this useless old tree been useful, my friend, it would not have grown ancient with green spreading limbs."
Papa God's Well, a story recorded in Haiti. There was a time when there was a drought. No rain fell for so long that the riverbeds and the streams were dry. All the animals were thirsty. They grew weak and thin. The earth was cracked. If there is no fresh water, there is no life. All the animals decided to come together, no matter how small or large, what color, what gender, what shape, what tail, what language they spoke. They decided that they would call Papa God and ask for help. They joined their voices together, shouting, mooing, neighing, groaning, chirping, singing, whispering. "Open the way, Papa God, we need your help. Open the way, Papa God, we need your help." And Papa God came. When he saw the earth, when he felt the suffering of animals, he was very sad. And Papa God did what Papa God can do. He dug a well so deep
into the earth that fresh water gushed up and rose to the surface, and all the animals drank. They were so grateful. Papa God planted a grove of many fruit trees, mangoes, breadfruit, orange, and bougainvillea bushes with red blooming flowers, and green grass grew everywhere. And the earth drank, and the earth was moist and fertile. Papa God said, remember 3 things. 1, everyone must drink water. 2, you must keep the water clean and only drink and use what you need. And 3rd, we need someone to guard the well, because later there will be human beings and they easily forget. They put trash in the water. They will take more than they need. Lizard, who thought that he was better than everyone else. Lizard said, I'll do it. I'll do it. I'll do it. So Lizard was given the task. That night everyone drank and slept well. Papa God left. But in the morning, when the animals came to drink again, Lizard found something wrong with each and every one of them. Cow had dirty hooves. Horse had dust on his tail. Pig had put his snout in the mud. There were fleas on dog. Cat, you know cat, licks everything everywhere. Little insects go in filthy little corners. Even the birds could eat seeds from the ground. Lizard sent them each away. The only one who drank water was Lizard. Soon, not only were the animals weak and ill, they were dying, while Lizard was growing plump and sleek, very proud of himself and the good job that he was doing. One day, Papa God came to see the animals and the well. When he saw the bodies of animals, when he felt the sorrow in the world and the loss of so many animals, he called out, Lizard. Lizard said, who is it? He could only see himself. Papa God said, it is I, Papa God. What happened? I did everything you said. I guarded the well. I'm taking care of everything. I'm the best. I am the best. Papa God sent Lizard to live in dry places so he would always value water. Then Papa God let all the animals that were alive drink from the well. Now who will guard the well? He asked. Little, warty, plump, big-bellied, big-eyed, big-hearted frog said, I'll do it. I'll do it. I'll do it. Papa God, I'll do it. I remember. I love everyone. I'll do it. Fresh water. Good. Papa God. So Frog was given the job. And Frog let everyone drink, and all the animals were pleased. The earth was happy. Papa God left. Whenever there is a well of fresh water, you'll find Frog still there singing. Remember, fresh water. Everyone drinks fresh water. Remember. But if you come to a well and the water is dirty or the well is dry, Frog is still there. You have to listen so hard. You sing, please remember, please remember, please remember. Don't forget, don't forget, don't forget. You know and I know that fresh water is life, and everyone, including every insect, every plant, everything in this world needs fresh water to live. Remember, remember, remember. And that's that story.
Long ago in Kazakhstan, a shepherd and a farmer lived in adjoining lands. Now, they lived there all their lives, and they loved each other well. Their families were close. It was as though they were related by blood. The farmer's land was lush and green. The shepherd's land was rocky, but still there was a sweet grass that grew between the rocks, and so the sheep were round and happy. Until one spring, a fever swept through the flock and all of the sheep perished. Now the shepherd could not farm this land. It was too stony and rocky for him to plant anything but the grass that grew there. So at last he came to his friend, his brother, the farmer, and he said, "My family and I will be moving to the city where we will beg for our lives." And the farmer said, "No, my friend, my brother, do not go. Stay here. You can farm half of my land. And when you've made enough money to buy another herd of sheep, then you can do that and go back to your own land and be a shepherd once more." Well, the shepherd gratefully said yes. And so both farmed that land. But one day the shepherd was digging and his shovel struck something hard in the ground. When he dug around it, he discovered it was an earthenware jar. And when he picked it up, it was very heavy. He unstoppered the top and found that it was filled to the brim with gold coins. He took this treasure to his friend and tried to press it into the farmer's hand, saying, "I dug this up on your land, it belongs to you." But the farmer said, "No, no, my friend, you are the one in need. Keep the gold." "I will not keep the gold, it belongs to you." And so they had their very first argument. And when they realized they could not agree what should happen to this treasure, they decided to go and ask for help from the village wise man, the judge. And so they carried that earthenware jar and they went till they found the judge sitting beneath his teaching tree, a field he owned at his back, in front of him 4 students. And when the farmer and the shepherd explained the problem they were having, the wise man said, "Let us ask my students what they think we should do." And so he turned to the first. "What do you believe we should do to solve this argument?" "Well," said that student, "they are arguing for the first time in their lives over something dug out of the ground. They should just bury it again and stop arguing." Said the wise man. Then he turned to the second student. "And you?" "Well, I believe that they have come to you for judgment and they should pay you for judgment, and so they should give you the treasure." Said the wise man. He turned to the third. "And you?" "Well, isn't it true that everything, especially treasure, belongs to the Khan? They should take the gold to the city and give it to the leader of our nation." Said the wise man. Then he turned to the fourth student. "What would you do with the treasure?" "Well," said the young man, "I have always dreamed of creating a magic garden for the poor that would have clear water running through it to feed their thirst, and thick grass on the ground like a cushion or a bed or a rug. There would be flowers there so fragrant that they would feed the soul, and trees growing, bearing fruit that would feed the body. If I had such a treasure, that's how I would use it. Yes, said the wise man, the judge. If these two agree, then I believe we should give you the coins and have you go to the city and buy seeds. I will give you this field behind us, and you can plant it, and in time you will have a garden for the poor. Well, the farmer and the shepherd happily agreed, and somewhat astonished, the young man lifted up the crock and carried it toward the city. Now, he'd never been there before, and he was amazed at the smells and the sights and the sounds. Before he even got to the marketplace, though, he saw a caravan passing by, and on the back of each of the camels were strapped bird cages, and on the sides of the camel's saddle, birds were tied by their feet with little nooses so that they lay against the camel's side, and with each step that the camel took, the birds would thwack against the side of the animal. Their cries were so pitiful, they sounded like broken parts of their song. And the student said, "Stop!" And the caravan driver stopped. He said, "What do you want?" "Where are you going with those birds?" asked the student. "Why, I'm taking them to the Khan's palace. I imagine he will buy them, and he'll eat some, and he'll cage some, and he'll give the feathers to the women of his household." "Well, you can't do that. You must free the birds," said the student. "Well, why would I free them? Are you going to pay me to do that?" "Well, yes, I will," said the student, and he offered up the earthenware crock. And when the caravan driver saw what was inside, he realized that it was at least as much, maybe more, than the Khan might have paid. He said, "All right then, the birds are yours." And he took a knife and cut all of the leather thongs that held the cages to the backs of the camels, or held the birds by their feet, and he gave all of them over to the student, and then he made his way through the marketplace. Well, the young man picked up the cages and he took them down the road, and he carried all the birds that had been noosed on the backs of the camels, and then he untied the leather so that the birds could be set upon their own feet, and he lifted the cage doors so that they could all step free. He went to a well and he brought back water, and he held it in his hands for them to drink. And one by one they drank, and then they shook themselves, and then they took off and they flew into the sky in every direction. And oh, it was a sight to see, the sky filled with birds. And then they were gone. And that's when the young man realized that he was supposed to use the gold to buy seeds, but he'd used the gold to buy the birds, and now the birds were gone and he had nothing. He felt like a fool. Still, he turned to go home, prepared to take himself before the judge and explain all that he had done, but he stopped first in the field that had been given him. And there he knelt on the bare ground and he wept. But when he opened his eyes, he saw that he was surrounded on every side by birds that spoke to him, saying, "We've heard about you. Our mothers and fathers, our brothers and sisters, our cousins and aunts and uncles, our grandparents have all told us what you did, how you freed so many of our race, and we are here to help you now." And so the birds began to jump about and pat the ground and scratch it with their claws. The biggest of the birds used their beaks to draw a trench through the field, and a spring bubbled up at one end. And so cold, clean water ran through the field. And then the birds all took off flying in every direction, and coming back with seeds of all kinds, they dropped them into the holes that they had made with their beaks and with their feet. And then the biggest of the birds stood at the edge of the field and fanned it with their wings and blew upon it with their warm, moist breath. And grass began to grow in the field, and flowers began to blossom, and trees rose up, and these leafed out, and then they flowered, and then they bore fruit. So that by magic, there before the student was the garden he had always envisioned for the poor. But he wasn't the only one to see it, and word began to spread, and those who had much and wanted more came on horseback and camel, coming to the garden to claim what grew within it. But as they drew close, stone walls rose out of the ground on four sides, and in the middle of one of the walls there was an iron gate. And when the rich men grew near with their greed on their faces, the gates closed and locked themselves with 7 locks, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And they could not enter the magic garden of the poor. One man who felt especially entitled rode his camel up toward the wall, and there he tried to climb on its back and stand and reach for a piece of fruit over the wall, but his camel stumbled and he fell to the ground. He got up limping. He led his camel home, and the others followed, understanding that the garden was not for them. And then those who had little or nothing began to arrive on all sides, and the gates opened wide for them. And they went inside, and they found that the grass was as soft as a carpet or a bed, that the water was so sweet to the tongue that it quenched their lifelong thirst, that the flowers were so fragrant that they fed their souls, and that the fruit was so delicious that it fed their bodies with all that they needed. When the sun set and night fell, those who had homes went home, and those who had nowhere to go lay down upon the carpets of grass. And the gates closed and locked, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and kept them safe all the night long. But at dawn, they opened again, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, so that they could come and go as they pleased. And so it was that a magic garden for the poor came to fruition because of the dreams in the heart of one man.
The tree was old and beautiful. Who knows how long it waited there, content in dark and proud in day? Who knows how long? Until Beast came. The beast came snuffling nose to ground and nearly rammed the tree before it looked. And then suddenly, wild green. Green smells, green light, green sounds of swish and sway. Oh, a sigh of silent awe. And then Beast knew what it loved best, green. And scrunch, a fragrant mouthful, and crunch, joyfully another. The Beast went munching lovingly around the tree and then hurried home to smile and sleep and dream of green and leaf and tree. Next day, the Beast, it hurried back to lie against tree's trunk, groan sweet adoring songs, and then crunch and munch and round again and hurry home to dream. Here comes the Beast, crunch munch and back again. Here comes the Beast, munch crunch, and home it goes. Oh, how happy were those days, until one day, coming, habit now, the beast could not find the tree. It snuffled up and down and around. No green here. No smell. No light. No rustling of the leaves. Only an ugly stick that whispered, I need. Tree, I need. A pang of despair. I took from tree. I never gave tree a thing. And then the beast hurried to the water hole, scooping up mud to bring to the tree, packing good earth around tree's roots, and carrying clear water from the stream. Bring mud, bring water, bring leaves to mulch the roots. No munching now, just acts of saving grace. Beast learned this lesson. We might learn it too. If you will take, you must give back. I take, I give. I take, I give. Beast's way.
Now there was once a time, and I pray that such a time will never come again, when the ruler of a kingdom distributed an edict that the old were nothing but a burden, and so all of the people who were old should be gotten rid of. The sooner, the better. And across the land, people actually hurried to comply. It was cruel. It was inhumane. It was devastating. And those who resisted did it silently and secretly. So suddenly, it was a land without anyone who was elderly. And do you know what this meant? It meant that young mothers found their work multiplied without help from grandmothers and crones in the neighborhood. They worked harder than ever alone. And young farmers floundered because they had no one older and wiser to help them navigate the decisions that need to be made at every turn on a farm. And children ached because there were fewer stories and fewer laps for comforts. The whole land drooped. In part, it drooped because there was no music. How could there be music? Oh, the instruments still stood in the corner, but sometimes no one was left in the house who knew how to play the instruments. And as for the parents, their days were full of so much more work and so much worry. Many of them were consumed with guilt. All in a land without stories and music. What kind of a land is that? But there was one farmer who loved his father and would not get rid of him. Instead, he decided he would hide his father. It was not so very hard to do. Their farm was isolated. And back then, houses didn't have big windows where anyone could look in. No, they were quite dark and airless by our standards. So the farmer would work during the day, and then in the evening, he and his father would sit by the fire They would tell stories. They had a game they played with pegs and stones. And sometimes they just sat in a companionable silence. Now, as often happens, when in one form of trouble comes, more and more come and pile on top of it. That year, when it came time for harvest, crop after crop after crop failed, and there was a famine. And the people were desperate for food, so they scraped their granaries. They consumed everything. And foolishly, short-sightedly, they consumed the seeds that would have been used for planting in the spring. Now the old man said to his son, I remember when I was a child, there was an old man who used to tell the story of what happened after a famine. So this is what you must do. It's almost spring. When the rains soften the earth in the spring, take the plow and go out and turn over the soil of the road that runs past our home. The young farmer thought this was a strange request, but he did as his father suggested. They waited till the soft spring rains came, and then when the earth was more pliable, he took his plow out into the road, and he turned over the soil. And within a week, here was some wheat sprouting, and rye. There was corn, and over here, suddenly, there were beans emerging from the earth. Oh, he put a piece of wood next to them so they'd have something to crawl on, and then he enclosed the entire area so no one would bring their wagon over it. It was a miracle. But his father said, no, you see, when wagons go past our farm on their way to market, some of the vegetables and grains that they're going to sell fall off between the cracks in the wagon or fall off from the back. They were only waiting for the earth to warm and for you to till the earth. And then the sun and the rain did what they always do. When people saw that the road in front of his house was sprouting new plants, well, someone told the king, and the king told everyone to dig up the road. And then he called the farmer to him. How did you know this? The young farmer said, I did not know, but someone older and wiser than I knew. And the king trembled inside. Oh, he knew that his ignorance and arrogance had damaged his land. He distributed a new edict. All old people should be revered. And that meant the young farmer could bring his father back outside to sit in the sun. His father could go back to puttering in a garden. And as for the others, There were old people who came back who had been sent to another land to protect them. There were old people who had also been hidden. Well, the fear and worry were cut. Oh, they were more than cut in half. It meant that young mothers had women to cook and sew and spin with. It meant that young farmers had old farmers to consult about the myriad of decisions that need to be navigated. Children rejoiced. There were more laps, and there were more stories to hear. And music once again filled the land. The Chinese have a saying, whoever has an old person in their home has something precious, a jewel. May your life be rich with many older jewels.
이야기 시작합니다. Once there was a young man who wanted to confuse the elder of his village. Everyone thought the old man was very wise, but the young man didn't. He didn't look like a leader. Yes, he is just an old man with old brain. I think I'm much smarter than him. Yes, I'm very smart. Today, I will prove it. So he went to the forest and captured a little bird and hid it in his hand and went to talk to the old man. Old man, I have a riddle for you. I heard that you are very, very smart. So please tell me, in my hands, the bird, is it alive or dead? You know, the young man smiled because he knew that there was no way the old man could win. Because the old man said the bird was dead. The young man would open his hand and release the little living bird. Tweet, 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 tweet. But if the old man said the bird was alive, the young man would crush the bird in his hand. What happened? What did the old man say? Can you guess? The old man looked into the young man's eyes and gently said, the answer, my son, is in your hand. Yes, it is in your hand.
Thanks for listening. What a lot of stories. I hope you found one that you like and want to go share with somebody. Go do it right away. And if you want some more stories to tell, take a look at my book, Peace Tales, World Folk Tales to Talk About, or my book, Kindness Tales, World Folk Tales to Talk About, or some of the many more stories that are in the book Earth Care, World Folk Tales to Talk About. Thanks to Jane Stenson and all her teacher friends for putting together activities for these. You'll find those at my website, along with links for some of the individual stories that you can pick up to show to your children if you happen to be teachers or parents and want to use stories that way. I'm really glad you were here today. And I want to thank Jeff Gear for putting this whole program together. Without him, it wouldn't have happened. And to the National Storytelling Network for putting it on their website. Thanks so much. Go tell a story.